"Get out of my store!" The manager yelled, but the unassuming woman turned and responded. Richard Scott Taylor was pointing furiously at the glass door of the store while shouting at the young woman who had just entered. His voice echoed through the modern, well-lit space, causing other customers to pause their shopping and watch the scene. The woman simply stared at him with a calmness that only further irritated the manager. "I already told you, you can't stay here," Richard bellowed, adjusting his dark tie with trembling hands. "This is a store for people who can afford our products." Tiffany Johnson held her synthetic leather bag firmly and looked directly into the eyes of the middle-aged man standing before her like a guard. Her light beige cardigan contrasted with her dark skin, and her hair was pulled back into a simple yet elegant bun. She didn't seem intimidated by the hostility directed at her. "Sir, I have the right to be here just like anyone else," Tiffany replied in a steady but firm voice. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to look at some products." The Golden Shine Appliance Store was considered one of the most reputable in Portland. Located downtown on a busy avenue, it catered to people from different social classes. At least that's what the advertisements claimed. In practice, Richard made sure to make it clear that not everyone was welcome there. Margaret Wilson, 67, was picking out a new refrigerator when she witnessed the start of the argument. She was familiar with that kind of situation, having faced similar prejudice in other establishments. Something about the young woman's demeanor caught her attention. There was a dignity in her gestures that piqued her curiosity. "Listen here, miss," Richard continued, lowering his voice slightly but keeping the aggression. "You've come here 3 times this week just to look around. It's bothering other customers. If you're not going to buy anything, you'd better find another place." "And who said I'm not going to buy?" Tiffany asked, opening her bag and pulling out a brown envelope. "I came here because I need specific information about a product you sell." Richard rolled his eyes impatiently. He had taken over as store manager 2 years ago and always prided himself on maintaining what he called standards of excellence. To him, that meant discouraging the presence of people he deemed unfit for the environment. "What kind of information?" he asked dismissively, crossing his arms over his chest. "Because if it's about financing or no down payment installments, I'll tell you right now, we don't offer those options to just anyone." Tiffany took a deep breath, keeping her composure despite the public humiliation. Around them, other customers began to inch closer, some clearly uncomfortable with the situation, others seemingly curious to see how it would unfold. "I need to know about the extended warranty for the MasterChef Pro Stove model you advertise on your website," Tiffany explained, pulling out a printed sheet from the envelope. "It says here there's a 5-year full warranty, but it doesn't specify if it covers imported parts." The question caught Richard off guard. That was an expensive model, nearly $6,000, and the technical question showed she had done her research before coming to the store. Still, he kept up his hostile stance. "That stove isn't for just anyone, he said condescendingly. "Besides the high price, it requires specialized installation and maintenance. Are you sure that's what you want to know?" It was then that Jennifer Miller, an employee who had worked at the store for 5 years, approached the group. She had observed the whole situation and disagreed with the manager's approach. Jennifer knew the products well and always treated every customer with respect, regardless of their appearance or social status. "Can I help?" offered Jennifer, addressing Tiffany directly. "About the MasterChef Pro warranty, I can clear up all your questions." Richard shot an annoyed look at the employee but couldn't fire her in front of customers. Jennifer was one of the most competent salespeople on the team and had a good rapport with clients. Still, he didn't like it when she went against his decisions. "Jennifer, you have other customers to attend to," Richard said curtly. "I'll handle this here." "Actually," Tiffany interjected, tucking the paper back into the envelope, "I'd rather talk to her. You seem to know the products better." The response made Richard's face flush. He was proud of his position and couldn't stand being undermined, especially in front of other customers. The store's activity had practically stopped, with people paying attention to the unfolding argument. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to it. "Listen carefully," Richard said, raising his voice again and pointing a finger at Tiffany. You're disrupting my store's operations. Either buy something right now or leave immediately. Your store? Asked a firm voice from the back of the establishment. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Mrs. Evelyn Thompson, 72 years old, owner of the Golden Shine chain. She walked toward the group with determined steps, leaning on an elegant dark wood cane. Her grey hair was styled in a classic updo, and she wore a simple but high-quality outfit. Richard paled at the sight of the chain's owner. Mrs. Evelyn rarely visited the stores, preferring to monitor results through reports. Her presence at that moment couldn't have been worse timing for the manager. "Mrs. Evelyn," Richard stammered, trying to regain his composure. "I didn't know you were here. I was just handling a minor issue." "Issue?" Mrs. Evelyn asked, looking around and noticing the customers watching the scene. "What kind of issue, Richard?" Tiffany seized the owner's arrival to introduce herself. There was something about the elderly woman's presence that gave her confidence, a sense that she might finally be heard fairly. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Tiffany said politely. "My name is Tiffany Johnson. I came here to inquire about one of your products, but the manager seems to think I shouldn't be in the store." Mrs. Evelyn studied Tiffany carefully. There was something familiar about the young woman, but she couldn't place it. Maybe it was her upright posture, her polite way of speaking, or simply the dignity with which she faced the hostile situation. "Why do you think she shouldn't be here, Richard?" Mrs. Evelyn asked, fixing her gaze on the manager. Richard began to sweat. He knew his words could cost him his job, but he was already too deep to back down. He decided to justify his attitude with what he considered professional reasoning. "Mrs. Evelyn, this young woman has been coming in for days just to look at the products," Richard explained, trying to keep a respectful tone. "She doesn't fit the profile of a customer for our higher-end items, and she's driving other buyers away." "Driving other buyers away?" Mrs. Evelyn repeated, raising an eyebrow. "How so?" Before Richard could answer, Mrs. Margaret stepped closer to the group. She had decided she couldn't stay silent in the face of such unfairness. As an older, experienced woman, she felt it was her duty to defend the young woman being humiliated. "Excuse me," Mrs. Margaret said, addressing Mrs. Evelyn directly. "I've been a customer here for over 10 years, and I can assure you this young woman hasn't bothered anyone. The one causing a disturbance is the manager with all his shouting." "And you are?" asked Mrs. Evelyn politely. "Margaret Wilson. I'm retired and live here downtown," she replied firmly. "I came to buy a new refrigerator, but I'm thinking of giving up after what I saw here today." Mrs. Margaret's statement caused murmurs among the other customers present. An elderly woman reconsidering a purchase because of how someone else was treated was a serious sign of a service problem. Richard realized the situation was slipping out of his control. He tried a different approach, aiming to ease the tension and show Mrs. Evelyn he had everything under control. "Mrs. Evelyn, perhaps I got a little carried away," admitted Richard, forcing a smile. "But you understand we need to maintain certain standards in the store. It's nothing personal against the young lady." "Nothing personal?" asked Tiffany, finally losing some patience. "You treated me like a criminal from the moment I walked in here." "That's not true," protested Richard. You just what?" interrupted Tiffany, opening the envelope again and pulling out more papers. "You assumed I wouldn't buy because I'm black, because my clothes aren't designer, because I carry a simple bag." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Richard opened his mouth to deny it, but no words came out. The accusation of racism hung in the air like a heavy cloud, and everyone present waited for his response. Mrs. Evelyn watched everything with growing indignation. She had built her chain of stores on principles of respect and quality service. Seeing one of her managers act this way deeply upset her. "Richard," said Mrs. Evelyn in a controlled but firm voice, "I want you to explain exactly what kind of customer our store is meant to serve." The question was a trap, and Richard knew it. Any answer he gave could be interpreted as discriminatory. He tried a diplomatic response, but his words sounded hollow and inconsistent. "Mrs. Evelyn, our store serves all customers," he said, trying to recover. "I only meant that some products are better suited for certain clients, considering technical and financial factors." "Technical factors?" asked Tiffany, unfolding one of the papers she carried. Then explain why the MasterChef Pro stove manual says it works perfectly in standard residential setups, but you claimed it needed specialized installation. The question revealed Tiffany wasn't just a casual shopper. She had studied the product's technical specifications and was prepared to challenge incorrect information. Richard realized he had completely underestimated the situation. Jennifer, who had followed the entire discussion, decided to step in again. As an experienced employee, she knew all the product specifications and recognized Tiffany was right in her observation. "Actually," said Jennifer, addressing Mrs. Evelyn, "the MasterChef Pro stove was designed specifically for standard residential use. Installation is simple, as long as it's done by a certified technician, which we provide." Richard shot Jennifer a furious look, but couldn't contradict her in front of the owner without seeming incompetent. It was becoming clear his attempts to discourage Tiffany were based on prejudice, not actual technical concerns. "Interesting," remarked Mrs. Evelyn, taking the paper from Tiffany's hands and examining it. "May I see where you got this information?" "From the store's official website," replied Tiffany, showing more papers. "I printed all the specifications, compared prices with other stores, and checked financing terms. That's why I came here with these specific questions." Mrs. Evelyn continued reviewing the documents Tiffany had brought. It was clear the young woman had done thorough research before coming to the store. This showed serious purchase intent, exactly the kind of customer any business should value. "And what are your terms for this purchase?" Mrs. Thompson asked Tiffany directly. "I have 40% of the amount for a down payment," Tiffany replied, pulling a bank statement from the envelope. "And I can pay the rest in 12 installments as long as the payments don't exceed $400. Brian was stunned. The amount Tiffany was willing to put down was over $2,000, a substantial sum for any sale. He had completely misjudged the customer's financial situation. Mrs. Thompson passed the statement to Jennifer, who nodded in confirmation that the numbers were within the store's financing limits. The owner's expression showed a mix of satisfaction and irritation. Satisfaction at having a serious customer, irritation at the treatment she'd received. "Jennifer," Mrs. Thompson said, "prepare a full quote for Miss Tiffany, including the stove, installation, and the extended warranty she asked about." "I'll take care of it right away, Mrs. Thompson," Jennifer replied, heading to the counter where the computers were. Brian stood frozen, watching the situation unfold in a way completely opposite to what he'd imagined. His attempt to push out an unsuitable customer had turned into a major sale, and worse, it had exposed his prejudice in front of the store owner. While Jennifer prepared the quote, Mrs. Thompson continued talking to Tiffany. There was something about the young woman that piqued her curiosity, a familiarity she couldn't explain. "Tiffany, what do you do for work?" Mrs. Thompson asked with genuine interest. "I'm a nurse at Mercy General Hospital," Tiffany answered proudly. "I've worked in the emergency department for 3 years." "A nurse?" Mrs. Thompson murmured, as if the information confirmed some suspicion. "And do you live here in Portland?" "Yes, in the factory district," Tiffany replied. "I was born and raised here. My mother worked her whole life as a maid to put me through school." Mrs. Thompson suddenly stopped, as if struck. The mention of the factory district and a mother who was a maid had triggered a specific memory. She studied Tiffany's face more closely, searching for familiar features. "What's your mother's name?" Mrs. Thompson asked, her voice slightly unsteady. "Dorothy Johnson," Tiffany answered, puzzled by the sudden interest. "She worked for a long time for a family in Beacon Hill. Why?" The impact of the revelation was visible on Mrs. Thompson's face. She gripped her cane more firmly and fell silent for a few seconds, processing what she'd just heard. "Dorothy," Mrs. Thompson whispered. "A petite woman with curly hair who always wore a colorful scarf on her head. You knew my mother?" Tiffany asked, surprised. Brian and the others waited for Mrs. Thompson's response, sensing something important was unfolding. The tension in the room had shifted entirely. "Yes, I did," Mrs. Thompson answered, tears forming in her eyes. "Dorothy worked in my home for nearly 15 years. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, the revelation hit like a bombshell. Tiffany froze, trying to process that the store owner had been her mother's employer. Brian realized the situation had taken on a much larger dimension than he'd imagined. "Your mother," continued Mrs. Evelyn, her voice trembling. "She always spoke of a daughter who was studying to become a nurse. She said it was the pride of her life." "My mother passed away 2 years ago," said Tiffany, also with tears in her eyes. "She always talked about a wonderful employer who treated her like family." Mrs. Evelyn stepped closer to Tiffany and, without hesitation, embraced her. It was a touching moment that moved everyone present. Even Richard, despite his discomfort, was affected by the scene. "Dorothy was so much more than an employee to me," said Mrs. Evelyn, still holding Tiffany. "She took care of my home and my family with such love. When she stopped working because she fell ill, I missed her terribly." "She always spoke of you with such warmth," replied Tiffany. "She said you helped pay for my final year of college." "And she deserved all the help in the world," said Mrs. Evelyn, pulling back slightly to look Tiffany in the eyes. "She was a woman of integrity, hard-working, and full of dreams for her daughter." Richard watched the scene with growing unease. He had tried to kick out of the store the very daughter of someone who had been pivotal in the life of the company's owner. The magnitude of his mistake was becoming clear. "Mrs. Evelyn," Richard ventured, trying to insert himself into the conversation, "I didn't know that." "That what, Richard?" asked Mrs. Evelyn, turning to him with a stern expression. "That she was the daughter of someone I knew? Should that have made a difference in how she was treated?" The question was rhetorical, but Richard tried to answer anyway, digging himself deeper into a professional grave. "Of course not, Mrs. Evelyn," he said, attempting to justify himself. "I just meant that if I'd known about the family connection—" "No family connection justifies what you did here today," Mrs. Evelyn interrupted. "You treated a customer with disrespect and prejudice, regardless of who she is or who she knows." At that moment, Jennifer returned with the printed estimate. She had witnessed the entire revelation about Tiffany's mother and was visibly moved. As a long-time employee, she knew Mrs. Evelyn's reputation as a fair and respectful person. "Here's the full estimate," said Jennifer, handing the papers to Tiffany. "With the down payment you mentioned, the installments would come to $380. Tiffany examined the estimate carefully. The numbers were exactly within her budget, and all her technical questions had been answered. It was precisely the purchase she had planned to make. "It's perfect," said Tiffany, smiling at Jennifer. "When can I finalize the deal?" "Right now, if you'd like," replied Jennifer, preparing to take Tiffany to her computer to complete the sale. "Wait," said Mrs. Evelyn, placing a hand on Tiffany's arm. "Before we close this deal, I'd like to make an offer." Everyone paused to hear what Mrs. Evelyn had to say. Richard, in particular, was tense, knowing any proposal from the owner could drastically affect his standing in the company. "Tiffany," Mrs. Evelyn continued, "your mother always told me you were a special, determined, and intelligent person. Seeing how you handled yourself here today, I can confirm she was right." Tiffany waited silently, unsure where Mrs. Evelyn was going with this. "That's why," said Mrs. Evelyn, "I'd like to offer you this stove as a gift, at no cost to you." "I can't accept that," Tiffany protested immediately. "I came here to buy it. I can afford it." "I know you can," Mrs. Evelyn replied with a smile. "But your mother did so much for my family over the years. Consider this a way to repay, even belatedly, everything she meant to us." Richard watched the exchange with growing agony. Not only had he lost a significant sale because of his prejudice, but now the owner was literally giving the product as a gift to the customer he had tried to kick out. "I don't know what to say," murmured Tiffany, clearly moved by the generosity. "Then accept it," said Mrs. Evelyn. "It would be an honor for me to know you're using a product from our store, thinking of your mother every time you cook." Tiffany finally agreed to accept the gift, but insisted on at least paying for the installation and extended warranty. Mrs. Evelyn accepted the counteroffer, understanding it was important for Tiffany to maintain her dignity and not feel entirely dependent on someone else's generosity. While Jennifer handled all the necessary paperwork, Mrs. Evelyn turned her attention to Richard. The conversation they were about to have wouldn't be pleasant, and she wanted it away from customers' ears. "Richard," said Mrs. Evelyn, "I need to speak with you in the office, now." Richard swallowed hard and followed Mrs. Evelyn to the small office at the back of the store. He knew his career at the company was hanging by a thread and desperately tried to think of something to say to turn things around. "Close the door," ordered Mrs. Evelyn as soon as they entered the office. Richard obeyed and stood in front of the desk like a defendant awaiting his sentence. Mrs. Evelyn sat in the chair behind the desk and watched him silently for a few seconds before speaking. "Richard, you've been working at my company for 2 years," Mrs. Evelyn began. "During that time, I've always received positive reports about your sales performance." "Thank you, Mrs. Evelyn," said Richard, hopeful he might not be fired. "But," she continued, raising her voice slightly, "sales performance isn't everything. The way you treated that young woman today was unacceptable." "Mrs. Evelyn, I can explain—" "Explain what?" she interrupted. "That you judged a customer by her appearance? That you assumed she couldn't afford it? That you were rude and disrespectful?" Richard lowered his head, unsure how to respond. All the accusations were true and he couldn't deny or justify them reasonably. "Your attitude doesn't reflect our company's values," said Mrs. Evelyn firmly. "I built this business on respect for customers, regardless of their background, race, or social status." "I understand, Mrs. Evelyn," murmured Richard. "I can learn from this mistake." "Maybe," she replied, "but not here. You're fired, Richard, effective immediately." The news hit Richard like a bolt of lightning. He had lost his job over a few minutes of prejudice and arrogance. He tried to argue, but Mrs. Evelyn was unwavering in her decision. "Mrs. Evelyn, please," begged Richard. "I have a family to support, bills to pay. It was just a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," she replied curtly. "It was pure and simple discrimination, and that's intolerable in my company." Richard realized there was no appeal. Mrs. Evelyn had already made her decision and wouldn't change her mind. He gathered his personal belongings and left the store with his head down, under the curious gazes of the customers still inside. After Richard's departure, Mrs. Evelyn returned to the main floor, where Tiffany was finishing signing the documents with Jennifer. The atmosphere was calmer, and other customers had resumed their shopping as usual. "Everything settled?" asked Mrs. Evelyn, approaching the two. "Yes, all set," replied Jennifer. "The installation is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon." "Perfect," said Mrs. Evelyn, turning to Tiffany. "And how are you feeling after all this?" "Still processing everything," admitted Tiffany. "When I woke up this morning, I never imagined I'd discover this connection with my mother." "Life sometimes surprises us," remarked Mrs. Evelyn. "Some good, some not so much." Mrs. Margaret, who had stayed in the store to follow the situation, approached the group. She wanted to congratulate Mrs. Evelyn for how she handled things and finish her own purchase. "Mrs. Evelyn," said Mrs. Margaret, "I want to commend you for how you dealt with this situation. It's good to know there are still business owners with principles." "Thank you, Mrs. Margaret," replied Mrs. Evelyn. "And as for your refrigerator, Jennifer will take care of everything for you." While Jennifer assisted Mrs. Margaret, Mrs. Evelyn and Tiffany continued talking. There were many things the store owner wanted to know about Dorothy's later years, and many stories Tiffany wanted to hear about the time her mother had worked for the Thompson family. "Your mother always said you were her greatest victory in life," Mrs. Evelyn shared. "She sacrificed so much so you could study." "I know," Tiffany answered, tears in her eyes. "She worked mornings at your house, afternoons at a cleaning company, and still sewed at night to make ends meet. And she never complained," Miss Evelyn added. "She always came home smiling, saying it was worth it because her daughter would be someone important in life." "She got to see my graduation," Tiffany said. "It was one of the happiest days of her life. She insisted on buying a new dress for the occasion." The two women shared more memories about Dorothy, each contributing their personal recollections. It was a moment of emotional connection that helped heal old wounds and build new bonds. "Tiffany," Mrs. Evelyn said after a few minutes, "I have a proposal for you." "Another proposal?" Tiffany asked, curious. "Yes," Mrs. Evelyn replied with a smile. "I need someone to take over as manager of this store. Someone who understands the value of customer respect and has strong principles." The offer took Tiffany completely by surprise. She had never considered working in retail, let alone in a leadership role like store manager. "Mrs. Evelyn, I'm a nurse," Tiffany said. "I don't know anything about sales or business management." "Sales techniques can be learned," Mrs. Evelyn answered, "but character and integrity are qualities you're born with, and you've shown you have them today." Tiffany fell silent, considering the offer. It was an interesting career opportunity, but it would mean leaving nursing, her passion and calling. "I need to think," Tiffany said honestly. "It's a huge change in my life." "Of course you do," Mrs. Evelyn agreed. "I don't expect an immediate answer. Take your time and let me know when you're ready." "What if I decide to stay a nurse?" Tiffany asked. "Then you'll keep being an excellent nurse," Mrs. Evelyn replied. "But know there will always be a place for you in my company if you change your mind later." The generosity and trust Mrs. Evelyn showed touched Tiffany deeply. It was comforting to know there were people willing to believe in others' potential, regardless of experience or background. Jennifer, who had finished helping Mrs. Margaret, rejoined the group. She had witnessed the whole shift in the store's atmosphere after Richard left and was curious about the new work dynamic. "Jennifer," Mrs. Evelyn said, "for now, you'll be in charge as interim manager. Is that all right?" "No problem at all, Mrs. Evelyn," Jennifer replied eagerly. "Can I count on your guidance if I have questions?" "Of course you can," Mrs. Evelyn confirmed. "And I want you to immediately implement training on respectful service for all employees. I don't want what happened today to ever happen again." "I'll take care of it right away," said Jennifer. "In fact, everyone was really embarrassed by Richard's behavior. That's not how we were trained to work." Jennifer's statement reassured Mrs. Evelyn. It was important to know the issue was limited to Richard personally, not the store's overall culture. That would make it easier to restore the establishment's reputation. At that moment, other employees approached to greet Mrs. Evelyn and apologize for their former manager's behavior. They all expressed embarrassment over the situation and promised to further improve customer service. "Everyone," Mrs. Evelyn said, addressing the staff, "I want you to know that what happened today doesn't reflect our company's values. Every customer must be treated with respect and dignity. No exceptions." The employees nodded in agreement, and some took the opportunity to praise how Tiffany had handled the entire situation. It was unanimous. She had shown exceptional class and grace. "Tiffany," one of the salespeople said, "congratulations on how you dealt with all this. Many people in your shoes would have lost their patience." "Thank you," Tiffany replied. "My mother always taught me that no one can take away your dignity, even in the toughest situations." The mention of Dorothy brought emotion back into the room. Mrs. Evelyn remembered how often she'd heard similar wisdom from the former employee, who always faced life's challenges with serenity and strength. After a few more minutes of conversation, Tiffany said goodbye to everyone and prepared to leave the store. It had been a transformative afternoon, full of revelations and intense emotions. She needed time to process everything. "Tiffany," Mrs. Evelyn called as she reached the door, "don't forget to let me know how the stove installation goes." "Of course," Tiffany replied with a smile. "And thank you for everything. My mother would have been so proud of how you treated me today." "She'd be proud of you," Mrs. Evelyn corrected, "for becoming the remarkable woman you are." Tiffany stepped out of the store with a warmed heart and misty eyes. On the street, she paused to look up at the sky and whisper a prayer of gratitude for the mother who had prepared her so well to face life's challenges. Meanwhile, inside the store, Mrs. Evelyn spoke with Jennifer about the changes they needed to implement. It was crucial for every employee to understand that respect for customers was a core value of the company. "Jennifer," Mrs. Evelyn said, "I want you to schedule a meeting with the entire team for tomorrow morning. We'll discuss our company values and establish clear service guidelines." "I'll set it up right away," Jennifer replied. "And about the manager position, will we open applications?" "I'll wait for Tiffany's answer first," Mrs. Evelyn said. "If she declines, then we'll open external recruitment." Jennifer was curious about whether Tiffany might accept the role, but respected Mrs. Evelyn's decision not to share further details about the offer. The following days brought transformation to Golden Shine. News of Richard's firing and the reasons behind it spread quickly among employees and regular customers. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with many praising Mrs. Evelyn's firm stance. Tiffany, meanwhile, spent the next few days reflecting on the management offer. She talked to co-workers, friends and family, weighing the pros and cons of such a radical career shift. The stove installation was done as agreed, and Tiffany made sure to call Mrs. Evelyn to thank her again and let her know everything had gone perfectly. During the conversation, she still hadn't made a decision about the job offer. "Mrs. Evelyn," Tiffany said during the call, "I'm still thinking about your proposal. It's a very important decision for me." "Of course it is," Mrs. Evelyn replied. "Take all the time you need. The offer still stands." "Can I ask you something?" Tiffany asked. "Go right ahead." "Why are you so sure I'd be a good manager? You barely know me." Mrs. Evelyn smiled on the other end of the line. It was a fair question, one that deserved an honest and complete answer. "Tiffany," Mrs. Evelyn said, "in over 40 years of experience in retail, I've learned that technical skills can be taught, but moral integrity comes from within. You showed integrity in a very difficult situation. But managing a store is very different from being a nurse," Tiffany argued. "That's true," Mrs. Evelyn agreed. "But in both jobs you have to deal with people, solve problems, and stay calm under pressure. And you've already proven you can do all that." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with Mrs. Evelyn clarifying questions about the responsibilities of the position and growth opportunities within the company. Tiffany thanked her for her patience and promised to give a final answer within a week. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, back to the story. During that week of reflection, Tiffany received an unexpected call. It was from Mrs. Margaret, the woman who had witnessed the whole situation at the store and decided to defend her publicly. "Tiffany, dear," Mrs. Margaret said, "I hope you don't mind that I got your number from Jennifer. I wanted to talk to you about something important." "Of course, Mrs. Margaret," Tiffany replied, curious. "How can I help you?" "Actually, I'm the one who wants to help you," Mrs. Margaret said. "I heard Mrs. Evelyn offered you a manager position, and I wanted to give you my opinion on it." Tiffany was surprised that Mrs. Margaret knew about the offer, but figured the news had spread among the store's regulars. "And what's your opinion?" Tiffany asked. "That you should accept," Mrs. Margaret answered without hesitation. "I saw how you handled yourself that day, and I'm sure you'd be an excellent manager." "But I don't have any experience in retail," Tiffany argued. "My dear," Mrs. Margaret said warmly, "experience comes with time, but character, respect for people, and leadership ability, those are things you either have or you don't, and you have them." The conversation with Mrs. Margaret was another important factor in Tiffany's decision. It was comforting to know that people who barely knew her had so much faith in her potential. By the end of the week, Tiffany had made up her mind. She called Mrs. Evelyn and arranged to meet in person. They met at the store itself on a quieter afternoon. "Mrs. Evelyn," Tiffany said after the initial greetings, "I've thought a lot about your offer, and I've come to a decision." "I'm listening," Mrs. Evelyn replied, trying to hide her anticipation. "I accept the challenge," Tiffany said with a smile. "I want to try being the manager of this store." Mrs. Evelyn couldn't hide her joy at Tiffany's decision. She stood up and hugged the young nurse who was about to become a businesswoman. "You won't regret this," Mrs. Evelyn said. "I'll give you all the support you need to succeed." "And I'll give it my all so I don't disappoint your trust," Tiffany replied. They agreed that Tiffany would start working at the store that same month, initially part-time, to gradually adjust to her new role. During this transition period, she would continue working reduced hours at the hospital. The news of Tiffany's arrival as the new manager was met with enthusiasm by the store employees. Jennifer, especially, was excited about the prospect of working under someone who had already shown such balance and fairness. "Tiffany," Jennifer said on her first day, "you can count on me for anything you need. I know the store's operations and the products we sell well." "Thank you, Jennifer," Tiffany replied. "I'll really need your experience to adapt quickly." Tiffany's first days as manager were intense learning experiences. She dedicated herself to understanding every aspect of the business, from inventory control to sales strategies. Her nursing background had prepared her to handle pressure and solve problems quickly, skills that proved very useful in retail. An interesting situation arose about 2 weeks after Tiffany took over. A customer walked into the store clearly upset, complaining about a defective product she had purchased. "I want my money back right now," the woman shouted. "This product is garbage, and you only sell junk here." Tiffany approached the customer calmly, remembering how she had felt when mistreated by Richard. She knew exactly how she didn't want anyone to feel in her store. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Tiffany said politely. "My name is Tiffany, and I'm the manager. How can I help resolve this issue?" The shift in tone surprised the customer, who had been prepared for an argument, not respectful service. She explained the product's defect and her frustration. "I completely understand your frustration," Tiffany said after listening to the complaint. "Let's resolve this right away. Would you prefer an exchange or a refund?" The customer was impressed by the quick and efficient resolution. She chose to exchange for another model and even praised the service. "Wow," the customer remarked before leaving. "What a difference in service here. Last time I came, I was treated terribly by a rude manager." "I hope you always have a positive experience with us now," Tiffany replied. "Every customer deserves respect and attention." Situations like this became common under Tiffany's management. She had established a service culture based on respect and efficient problem-solving, leading to a significant increase in customer satisfaction. Mrs. Thompson made regular visits to the store and was always impressed by the improvements Tiffany implemented. Sales had increased, complaints had dropped drastically, and the work environment had become much more harmonious. "Tiffany," Mrs. Thompson said during one visit, "you've exceeded all my expectations. The store has never run this well." "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson," Tiffany replied. "I'm learning a lot and feeling more comfortable in this role every day." "And how's the adjustment? Do you miss nursing?" "Sometimes," Tiffany admitted, "but I've realized helping people isn't exclusive to healthcare. Here I can still make a difference in people's lives." It was true. Tiffany had found ways to apply her calling for caregiving in a retail setting. She treated every customer like a patient needing specific attention and care. One day, about 3 months after taking over, Tiffany received an unexpected visitor. It was Richard, her predecessor, who had come to the store with a humble and embarrassed expression. "Tiffany," said Richard, "I know I have no right to be here, but I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes." Tiffany hesitated for a moment, remembering the humiliation she had endured, but decided to hear him out. They moved to the office, away from the ears of customers and employees. "What do you want, Richard?" Tiffany asked directly. "I want to apologize," Richard said, lowering his head. "My behavior that day was unacceptable and inexcusable." "Why are you doing this now?" Tiffany asked, crossing her arms. "Because these past few months gave me time to reflect on my prejudices," Richard replied. "Losing my job made me realize how wrong I was." Tiffany studied him in silence, trying to gauge whether his remorse was genuine or just an attempt to gain something in return. "Richard," she finally said, "I accept your apology. But you need to understand that forgiveness doesn't mean there are no consequences for our actions." "I understand," Richard said. "I'm not here to ask for my job back. I just wanted you to know that I recognize my mistake and that I'm truly sorry." "All right," Tiffany said. "Thank you for your honesty." Richard stood to leave, but before reaching the door, he turned back to Tiffany. "Can I ask one more thing?" he said. "Go ahead. How were you able to forgive so easily? If it were me, I'd hold a grudge forever." Tiffany smiled, remembering her mother's teachings about the importance of forgiveness. "My mother always said carrying anger is like carrying a heavy stone," Tiffany explained. "It only hurts the person holding it. It's better to set the stone down and move forward." The answer struck Richard deeply. He left the store with a sense of relief and a valuable lesson about dignity and forgiveness. After Richard left, Tiffany returned to the main floor of the store, where she found Jennifer assisting a young couple picking out appliances for their first apartment. "Tiffany," Jennifer called, "can you help this couple? They have some technical questions about electrical installation." Tiffany approached the couple and began clarifying their concerns. During the conversation, she learned they were a young nurse and a teacher, both early in their careers and on a tight budget. "I completely understand your situation," Tiffany said with empathy. "I've been there myself when I first started out. Let's see what we can do to fit your budget." She worked with the couple to put together a package of products that met their needs within their financial means. She arranged flexible payment terms and even included some extra services at no additional cost. "Wow," the young teacher said. "We've never been treated so well in a store. Thank you so much for your help." "Don't mention it," Tiffany replied. "It's a pleasure to help people building their lives with so much love and dedication." Situations like this had become a hallmark of Tiffany's management. She always found ways to assist customers, especially those facing financial struggles or young professionals just starting out. Evelyn, who had witnessed part of the interaction with the young couple, approached Tiffany with a proud smile. "You have a natural gift for this," Evelyn remarked. "You manage to make great deals while always keeping the customer's well-being in mind." "I learned from my mother that success only has value when it's shared," Tiffany replied. "If I can help someone achieve a dream, that makes me happy too." "Your mother would be so proud to see the woman you've become," Evelyn said, touched. "I hope so," Tiffany answered. "I try to honor the values she taught me in everything I do." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a new customer, an elderly gentleman who entered the store leaning on a cane with a confused expression. Tiffany immediately walked over to offer assistance. "Good afternoon, sir," Tiffany said kindly. "How can I help you?" "Good afternoon, dear," the man replied. "I need a microwave, but I don't understand any of these modern technologies." Tiffany spent nearly an hour patiently explaining the differences between the models, demonstrating the functions, and making sure the man fully understood how to use the appliance he chose. "Do you have grandchildren?" Tiffany asked during their conversation. "Yes, 3 teenage grandchildren," the man answered with a smile. "Then I'd recommend this model here," Tiffany suggested, pointing to a microwave with a simpler control panel. "It's easy to use and has all the basic functions you need, but it's not too complicated." The man was very pleased with his choice and the service he received. Before leaving, he made a remark that deeply touched Tiffany. "My dear," he said, "you treated me with such kindness that you reminded me of my own daughter. Thank you so much for your patience." "It was my pleasure to help," Tiffany replied. "If you have any questions, feel free to come back and we'll sort it out." After the man left, Jennifer approached Tiffany with an impressed look. "Tiffany, you spent almost an hour with that customer, and the sale wasn't even that big," Jennifer commented. "Jennifer," Tiffany responded, "the value of a sale isn't just measured by the money that goes into the register. That gentleman left here happy, and he'll tell others how well he was treated. That's worth far more than any immediate profit." Tiffany's customer service philosophy began to spread throughout the city. Satisfied customers recommended the store to friends and family, and many people came specifically because they'd heard about the excellent service. One day, about 6 months after Tiffany took over as manager, she received a call that would change the course of her life once again. "Tiffany," Evelyn said on the other end of the line, "I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning?" "Of course, Evelyn," Tiffany replied, curious about the matter. The next day, Tiffany went to the headquarters of Golden Shine, located in a commercial tower in downtown Portland. It was her first time visiting the corporate office, and she was impressed by the company's structure. "Tiffany," Evelyn said as soon as she arrived, "have a seat. I have a proposal for you." "Another proposal?" Tiffany asked playfully. "You never stop surprising me." "This one is even bigger than the last," Evelyn said with a mysterious smile. "I want you to become the regional director of our chain." The proposal left Tiffany speechless. Regional director meant overseeing all the company's stores in the Portland area, a huge responsibility for someone who had only been in retail for 6 months. "Evelyn, I don't know what to say," Tiffany stammered. "I know it's a big responsibility," Evelyn said, "but you've already proven you have all the qualities needed for the role: leadership, integrity, business vision, and most importantly, respect for people." "But I'm still learning about retail," Tiffany argued. "And you'll keep learning," Evelyn replied. "The difference is now you'll also be teaching. I want you to bring your customer service philosophy to all our stores." Tiffany asked for a few days to think about the offer, but deep down she already knew she would accept. It was an opportunity to make an even greater impact on people's lives, something that had always been her main motivation. As she reflected on the new proposal, Tiffany visited her mother's grave. It was something she always did when she needed to make important decisions, as a way to connect with the values Dorothy had taught her. "Mom," whispered Tiffany, kneeling before the simple headstone, "would you believe what's happening in my life? Sometimes it feels like a dream." The wind gently rustled the leaves of the nearby tree, as if it were a tender response from Dorothy. Tiffany smiled, feeling her mother's loving presence and the confirmation that she was on the right path. By the end of the week, Tiffany called Mrs. Thompson and accepted the promotion. She would start as regional director the following month, taking responsibility for 5 stores in the area. "Mrs. Thompson," Tiffany said during the call, "I want to thank you for all the trust you've placed in me." "Tiffany," Mrs. Thompson replied, "I'm the one who should be thanking you. You've transformed not just one store but my entire perspective on leadership and business values." Tiffany's farewell from her store management role was emotional. All the employees gathered to congratulate her on the promotion and thank her for months of harmonious and respectful work. "Tiffany," Jennifer said, speaking on behalf of the team, "you completely changed the atmosphere of this store. We've never had such inspiring leadership." "The credit belongs to all of you," Tiffany replied, moved. "I just gave everyone the chance to show their best." On her first day as regional director, Tiffany visited all 5 stores under her supervision. In each one, she observed customer service, spoke with employees and customers, and identified areas for improvement. At one store, she witnessed a situation similar to what she had experienced months earlier, an employee treating a customer poorly due to prejudice. Tiffany intervened immediately, but in an educational, not punitive way. "Brian," she said to the employee after resolving the situation with the customer, "we need to talk about your service." "Did something happen, Tiffany?" asked Brian, a young sales associate who had been with the company for 2 years. "Yes, it did," Tiffany replied. "I saw how you treated that elderly customer, with impatience and disregard. That's not in line with our company's values." Brian tried to justify himself, saying the customer was difficult and asked too many questions. Tiffany listened patiently and then shared her own experience. "Brian," she said, "let me tell you a story. A few months ago, I was mistreated in a store just like you treated that customer today." She recounted her entire experience with Richard, from the initial humiliation to the positive consequences that emerged from the situation. Brian listened carefully, beginning to understand the seriousness of his behavior. "Do you know the difference between you and the manager who mistreated me?" Tiffany asked. "What?" Brian asked, intrigued. "You still have a chance to learn and change," Tiffany replied. "He chose to cling to his arrogance and lost his job." The conversation had a profound impact on Brian. He apologized sincerely and promised to change his approach with customers. Tiffany decided to monitor his progress closely, offering guidance and support. Situations like this became common in Tiffany's work as regional director. She traveled constantly between stores, not just supervising but also educating and inspiring employees. Within a few months, all the stores in the region showed significant improvements in sales, customer satisfaction, and workplace morale. Mrs. Thompson was impressed with the results. "Tiffany," she said during a monthly meeting, "you've managed to transform the entire region. How did you do it?" "I didn't do it alone," Tiffany replied. "I just showed every employee that treating people with respect isn't just the right thing to do morally, it's also good for business." "You have a very mature business sense for someone so young," remarked Mrs. Evelyn. "My mother always said age doesn't determine wisdom," replied Tiffany. "What matters is how many life lessons you're willing to learn." A year after becoming regional director, Tiffany received an even more challenging offer. A major national appliance chain had heard about her work and wanted to hire her as general manager. The offer was tempting: a much higher salary, headquarters in New York City, national responsibility. But Tiffany hesitated. She had built something special with Mrs. Evelyn and the Golden Shine team. "Mrs. Evelyn," Tiffany said during a frank conversation, I need to tell you about this offer I received. Mrs. Evelyn listened to all the details without showing surprise. She already knew a professional of Tiffany's caliber would eventually attract interest from bigger companies. And do you want to accept it? Mrs. Evelyn asked. I don't know, admitted Tiffany. It's an incredible career opportunity, but at the same time, I feel I still have so much to do here. Tiffany, Mrs. Evelyn said warmly, you can't base career decisions on gratitude. If this opportunity is better for your professional growth, you should seriously consider it. But what about you and the company? Tiffany asked. We'll keep going, Mrs. Evelyn replied with a smile, and there will always be a place for you if you ever want to come back. Mrs. Evelyn's generosity moved Tiffany deeply. Even at the risk of losing a valuable employee, she prioritized Tiffany's well-being and career growth over her own interests. After a few more days of reflection, Tiffany made her decision. She called the New York City company and politely declined the offer. Mrs. Evelyn, she said during their call, I've decided to stay. I want to keep building something special here with you. Are you sure that's what you want? Mrs. Evelyn asked. I am, Tiffany replied firmly. Here, I can make a difference in people's lives in a more direct and personal way, and that means more to me than any salary. Then we need to talk about your future with the company, Mrs. Evelyn said. How about becoming my partner? The partnership proposal completely surprised Tiffany. She had never imagined she could one day own part of a company, especially one she had first known as a mistreated customer. Partner, Tiffany repeated, hardly believing what she was hearing. Yes, Mrs. Evelyn confirmed. You've already proven you have business vision, leadership, and values that align with mine. Together, we can expand the company while staying true to our principles. Tiffany accepted the partnership offer, becoming a 30% owner of Golden Shine. It was the ultimate recognition of her competence and the value she brought to the business. The partnership formalization ceremony was held at one of the chain's stores, with all employees present. It was an emotional moment, especially for those who had followed Tiffany's journey from her early days as manager. Everyone, Tiffany said in her speech, I want you to know this partnership doesn't change our core values. We'll still prioritize respect for people above all else. The employees applauded enthusiastically. They knew that under Tiffany's leadership, the company would maintain its culture of respect and dignity in service. 2 years after the partnership, Golden Shine had expanded to 10 stores and become a regional benchmark for customer service. Tiffany developed a training program that was copied by other companies in the industry. During an awards ceremony by the Portland Chamber of Commerce, where Golden Shine received the Best Customer Service Award, Tiffany was invited to give a speech about her business philosophy. Some years ago, Tiffany began before the packed auditorium, I was humiliated in a store because of prejudice. At that moment, I could have held on to resentment and stopped believing in people. The audience listened intently, curious to see where Tiffany was going with her story. But I learned from my mother that turning pain into a lesson is the greatest victory we can achieve, she continued. Today I run a company that was born from that painful experience. Tiffany's speech was widely shared on social media and local news, inspiring other business owners to rethink their customer service practices. Months later, Tiffany received an unexpected call. It was from Brian, the young salesperson she had mentored about customer service early in her tenure as regional director. Tiffany, Brian said, I have some news for you. I'm listening, Tiffany replied, curious. I opened my own appliance store, Brian announced proudly. And you know my company's motto. What is it? Tiffany asked, smiling. Every customer deserves respect, Brian answered. I learned that from you. The news filled Tiffany with pride. Knowing her lessons were multiplying through others was the greatest reward she could receive. Brian, she said, I'm so proud of you. I know you'll be very successful. Thank you, Tiffany, Brian replied. You changed my life when you taught me to treat people with dignity. The conversation with Brian made Tiffany reflect on the impact one person could have on others. She had first learned this from her mother, then from Mrs. Evelyn, and now she was passing those lessons forward. At the end of that year, Tiffany decided to visit her mother's grave again. It was a tradition she kept whenever she wanted to share important achievements or simply feel her mother's presence. "Mom," she said, kneeling before the headstone, "if only you could see how far we've come. A thriving company, happy employees, satisfied customers, all built on the values you taught me." A gentle breeze swayed the flowers Tiffany had brought, like a tender nod of approval from Dorothy. "I promise to keep honoring your memory," Tiffany whispered. "Every person we treat with respect in our stores is a tribute to you." As she stood to leave, Tiffany noticed someone else visiting a nearby grave. It was a middle-aged man who seemed to be going through a hard time. "Excuse me," Tiffany said politely. "Are you all right?" The man looked up and Tiffany was shocked to recognize him. It was Richard, her former manager, who now looked worn and aged. "Tiffany," Richard said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Visiting my mother," she replied, gesturing to the nearby grave. "And you?" "My father," Richard said, his voice breaking. "He passed last week." Despite their history, Tiffany felt compassion for Richard's pain. She stepped closer and offered sincere condolences. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said gently. "Thank you," Richard replied. "Tiffany, can I tell you something?" "Of course. After I lost my job at Golden Shine, I went through some very hard times," Richard admitted. "I was unemployed for months, had to sell my car, almost lost my home." Tiffany listened without judgment, understanding he needed to vent. "But you know what was worst?" Richard continued. "Realizing all these problems started because I didn't know how to treat people with respect. My own prejudice destroyed my career." "And how are things now?" Tiffany asked. "Better," replied Richard. "I got a job at a small store, making less than before, but I learned to value every opportunity. And most importantly, I learned to treat every customer with dignity." "I'm happy to hear that," said Tiffany sincerely. "Tiffany," Richard said before they parted, "I want you to know you were key to my transformation. Your example of dignity that day left a deep mark on me." "Richard," Tiffany replied, "we all deserve a second chance to be better people. I'm glad you took yours." The unexpected meeting at the cemetery was further confirmation for Tiffany that her actions had consequences far beyond what she imagined. Even Richard, who had mistreated her, had indirectly benefited from her example. Back at work, Tiffany shared the experience with Mrs. Evelyn, who was impressed by her partner's maturity and generosity. "Tiffany," Mrs. Evelyn said, "you have a rare ability to turn negative situations into opportunities for growth for everyone involved." "I've learned that holding on to bitterness only hurts the one holding it," Tiffany replied. "It's better to turn pain into a lesson and move forward." "Your mother truly raised you well," Mrs. Evelyn remarked. "She taught me that our real wealth isn't the material things we accumulate, but the positive impact we make on people's lives," Tiffany said. "And that's something no one can take from us." Tiffany's life philosophy remained the foundation of Golden Shine's growth. Every new store opened followed the same principles of respect and dignity in service, creating a unique business culture in the market. Years later, when Tiffany was already recognized as one of the most respected businesswomen in the region, she received an invitation to give a lecture on leadership at a local university. During the talk, a young student asked a question that made her reflect deeply on her journey. "Professor Tiffany," the student said, "if you could go back in time, would you change anything about how you handled that discrimination situation at the store?" Tiffany thought for a few seconds before answering. "You know," she finally said, "I wouldn't change a thing. That painful experience taught me valuable lessons and led me down a path I never imagined I'd take." "But wasn't it really hard to stay calm in that moment?" the student pressed. "It was very hard," Tiffany admitted, "but my mother always told me our true strength shows not when we're comfortable, but when we're being tested." Her answer drew spontaneous applause from the audience, mostly young people inspired by Tiffany's story of resilience. After the lecture, many approached to congratulate her and share their own experiences with discrimination and overcoming challenges. It was yet another confirmation that her story had become a source of inspiration for many. One of those who sought her out was a young nurse who introduced herself as Samantha. Tiffany, Samantha said, I'm also a nurse, and your story really resonated with me. I was wondering if you have any advice for someone thinking about changing careers. Samantha, Tiffany replied, the most important thing is making sure your personal values align with the new direction you want to take. Technical skills can be learned, but moral integrity comes from within. And how do you know when it's the right time to make the change? When you realize you can make more of a difference in people's lives on the new path than on the current one, Tiffany answered. That's what motivated me to accept the challenge of working in retail. The conversation with Samantha brought back memories of the day she herself had decided to leave nursing to venture into the business world. It had been a tough decision, but one that proved to be the right one. Months after that talk, Tiffany received a call from Samantha saying she had accepted a management position at a medical equipment company, yet another person who had been inspired by her journey to seek new challenges. End of story. Now, tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave a sincere comment below. Do you think Tiffany made the right decisions along her journey? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories.